Okay, good evening, everyone. I say good evening because, as you can tell, we're not in the actual Bas Medrash. We are recording a shiur which was given live last Monday, and we are in class number 4 of Hilchot Shmita, the laws of the sabbatical year. And as we've gone through the various stages, finally today we're going to reach the, if you will, the really juicy part of Shmita, which is the actual milachot, the prohibited labors of Shmita. To date, we looked at an overview of Shmita. We saw the psukim. We talked about some of the hashkafa, some of the philosophy behind Shmita. The second class we devoted to all those calculations, the calendar. How do we know this upcoming year, this Rosh Hashanah, is the beginning of the Shmita year? Based on what? What's the anchor? We did all that counting and calculating. Last week, in the third class in the series, we talked about Tosefet Shvi'it, the aspects of Shmita that do or do not apply even before Rosh Hashanah, even before Shmita comes in. Just like Shabbos, we light candles before sunset, ushering in Shabbos early. There are certain aspects of Shmita which apply even from this summer. We talked about that, and if you want to see that, you can go back and reference that class already from Tu B'Av, approximately 35 days from today is already the beginning of our preparations. And today, as I said, we're going to talk about what happens when Shmita actually comes. And we're going to basically, in terms of practical bottom line halacha, by the time we finish this evening, we're going to address house plants. That's really the topic today. House plants, potted plants, how are they affected in Shmita? And the reason we're going to do that is because it's a relatively self-contained topic. It's not a whole jungle to deal with, but it's like in a potted plant, it's very contained. But also because we're going to focus on probably the granddaddy, the ultimate no-no in Shmita, the ultimate prohibition, the ultimate malacha in Shmita, which is zriyah, planting, sowing, putting a seed in the ground. That is the granddaddy of all mitzvot, of all the prohibitions of the averot in Shmita. And I don't just say granddaddy as a turn of phrase, but actually it's called in halacha an av melacha, a father, a general category, as opposed to a tolada. So those are two good words to know. Maybe I'll even share with you a little whiteboard here, and I can just give you those words so you can know it for yourself. The words are in Hebrew, av and tolada. Okay, av literally means, of course, like Abba, father, but it means the general category, the source category, and tolada is literally the offspring, and it refers to the derivative. Like there's the general principle, and then there's the derivative. That's the tolada. So we're going to kind of understand from the sources, from the psukim down to the Mishnah and the Gemara to the Psak Halacha and the Rambam, what are the av and what are the tolada. And this is going to have very practical ramifications, as I said, all the way down to the question of house plants, potted plants in the Shmita year. Okay, I'm going to come back and I'm going to share my screen again in a second. But in the meantime, let me come back to you, and I'm going to wish you what I wish to the people who saw the class live. I'm going to wish you, we say Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos on Shabbos, and some people say Guten Erev Shabbos, a good Erev Shabbat, a good Friday afternoon when the Shema Yisrael is always coming down. So we're beginning each of these classes with a Guten Erev Shmita. We're already on like the Friday afternoon where you can already feel the Shabbos coming in. You can smell the Shabbos cooking, so we can already smell, as it were, the spiritual fragrance of Shmita. Okay, so let's share the screen. I'm going to show you some psukim, and today we're going to have another example where so often we try in our class to let me just do a little technical thing here. You'll pardon me. We're going to it's a lot harder teaching to a computer screen, an empty computer screen, than it is to a real live class. So pardon me if I'm stuttering, kind of looking at this picture of the Beis HaMikdash in front of me. We're going to have another live example of how the halacha works. We always say we have three goals in this series. We always want to know the bottom line halacha, what to do, what not to do. We want to understand the source of how it developed, how it was evolved, if you will. And we also, the third goal is to kind of understand general principles of how halacha works. So today we're going to see a wonderful example of how we go from the Torah shebichtav to the Torah shebal peh, from the written Torah to the oral Torah, to the Gemara, to the Mishnah. And I guess we'll jump right in. Let's look at the psukim. I'm going to share my screen, and that maybe will be even easier to look at. Okay, no, it's not that. Here we go. Okay, hope everyone sees it. So if you recall, the headquarters of Shmita in the Torah is Parshat Bahar, Vayikra 25, Kaf Hey. And there are other small, minor mentions, 2 in Sefer Shmot, perhaps 2 in Sefer Dvarim, single psukim, phrases. But here we have an entire chapter devoted to Shmita. And let's read what we find at the beginning. I'm going to skip here to verse 4, Pasuk Dalet. I'll read it in the Hebrew. I'll try to highlight it. And I'm going to try to, there's no audience participation today, but I'll kind of be your virtual audience. Uva Shana Shvit, in the 7th year. Uva Shana Shvit, in the 7th year, the sabbatical year. Shabbat Shabbaton Yeh La'aretz. The land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest. Shabbat Ladonai. It is a Sabbath of the Lord. Now, here's what we really want to pay attention to. I'm going to highlight it. Look at these 2 phrases in Hebrew. Sadcha lo tizra. Do not sow your field. V'karmecha lo tizmor. Do not prune your vineyard. Okay, sowing your field, I know what that means. It's a field of wheat. It's not a perennial crop. It's an annual crop. You have to sow it every year. You plant those seeds every year, and that you do not do in the Shmita. Sadcha lo tizra. What is pruning your vineyard? For a guy like me, who I have absolutely no green thumbs, all thumbs when it comes to gardening, if you would ask me, when I see someone pruning and you have that like kind of plier tool and cutting off branches, I'm like, oh, you probably want the leaves or the branches for, I don't know, you want the leaves to make grape, stuffed grape leaves, and you want the twigs maybe to make a bonfire. Of course, that's not why you prune your vineyard. The pruning is not because you want those twigs or those branches or those leaves. The pruning is to enhance and facilitate the growth of the vineyard. It's kind of like a lesson in life. Sometimes you have to cut away the unwanted to make something grow. So anyone out there, I'm gonna pause virtually and ask you, do you see a similarity between these 2 halachot? Not planting, not sowing rather, and not pruning. Anyone? I know there's no one out there, but if you're thinking about it, give it another moment to think. You got it? What's the common denominator? these two melachot, these two prohibited labors, have in common that they are to facilitate growth. Their purpose is to facilitate growth. Planting is to grow a seed, and pruning is also to facilitate growth. Hold that thought. Let's look at the next verse. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest. That which you didn't plant anything, but some things kind of popped up by themselves, the aftergrowth from the previous year. Lo tiktzor, do not harvest, and I'm adding in a regular way, in an industrial way where you're exhibiting your exclusive ownership of it. You have to treat it like you're a guest and only take a little bit, just like a guest would for your immediate use, for your immediate consumption. Okay, but here we have number one, lo tiktzor. And see, that's in yellow, notice that. Okay, you didn't prune your vineyard, but the grapes are still going to grow because a vine is perennial. It's like an apple tree. The grapes grow every year. They may not grow as well if you didn't prune them, but they're going to be grapes there. So those also, lo tivtzor, do not gather them. Do not gather them. Rather, shnat shabbaton yela'aretz, it should be a year of complete rest for the land. Okay, the same question here in Pasuk 5, Pasuk Hey, the 5th verse. Do you see a connection between lo tiktzor, do not harvest, and lo tivtzor, do not gather? Of course you do. These are both things which are not to facilitate growth, but these are limitations and restrictions on what you can do to kind of reap the benefits, to take in, to receive from the fruits of the land. Harvesting and gathering, they're almost synonyms. So I'm going to tell you something now. We know there are a myriad of restricted labors in malachot and Shmita. You can't prune and you can't plant, but you also can't graft and you can't water and you can't irrigate and you can't dig an irrigation ditch and you can't clear a field of stones and other obstacles. And you can't fertilize, and you can't spray pesticides. If any of you would want to do that, you can't put all kind of ointments and balms to help a plant or a tree. There's many. There's a long list. It's not exactly like Shabbat, which has 39 melachot, which those are just the avot, the overarching categories, and an infinite amount of other categories. But okay, so the common denominator of these two, sorry, that was that was the wrong continuation. I had a little break there from the recording. Again, I apologize. So what I'm going to tell you is that there's a whole list of prohibited and restricted activities to deal with your agriculture and your plants, but in the Torah, these are the only 4 commandments. If you have the 10 commandments of Shmita, it wouldn't be the 10 commandments, it would be the 4 commandments. Nothing else, all the cousins and children and grandchildren of these 4, they're not mentioned explicitly in the Torah. Sadcha lo tizra, don't sow. Karmecha lo tizmor, don't prune. Kisircha lo tiktzor, don't harvest. And your vineyard lo tivtzor, don't gather. That is it. And the question is this. The question is, we know that sometimes the Torah tells us an example of something, and we're supposed to, I got the example, I learned the principle, and I can apply it further. I can extrapolate from it. And sometimes you could say the Torah gave me an example, and that's it. You can't add on. What's with this case? Are these just examples when the verse says, for example, The land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, the Sabbath to the Lord. I don't know what that means. What should the land make kiddush? I should spill wine and maybe make hamotzi? What? So then the Torah gives you an example. Don't sow your field or prune your vineyard. I got it. So also, I guess this, and this also. Or do you say no? The Torah delineated exactly what yes and what no. So this is the question. It's not my question. It's actually the Gemara. The Gemara wants to know: are these the only prohibited activities? Mina Torah, Doraita, from the Torah, and all the other restrictions and prohibitions that we may find, those are all Dirabanan, those are rabbinic ordinances, or are these just examples and everything is Mina Torah? You may ask, why does it make a difference if it's Doraita or Dirabanan? We're faithful Jews, and faithful Jews, it means we don't just follow the Bible, we follow the Chachamim. We are the Prushim. We believe in the Torah Shebichsav and the Torah Shebal Peh. That's our Yiddishkeit. That's our Judaism. We have Emunas Chachamim in Chazal. So why does it make a difference whether it's Dorais or Darabanan? Because within the framework of Halacha, the Chachamim, who are the ones who instituted the Dinei Darabanan, they made differences. They made the Doraita, the Torah, super strict, and their own ordinances, they embedded within them certain leniencies. And this is the basis for all of Shmita. Whatever is Durabanan, we have a whole set of leniencies which we can apply. If it's Doraita, it's much, much stricter. Okay, so this was the question of the Gemara. So this is a machloket between Abaye and Rava. There was a discussion here in the Gemara in Moed Katan. Now, Abaye and Rava, I hope it's familiar to you, those two names. Those were kind of the two key Amoraim, Chachmei Talmud, the sages of the Talmud. They're actually, their kever is not far from here, up in Canaan, near the army base there. This is a Gemara in Moed Katan. That's the Babylonian Talmud. Very often, as we'll see, much of the halachot of Shmita is not found in the Babylonian Talmud. There is actually no Masechet Shvi'it. We don't have tractate Shmita in the Talmud Bavli. We only have it in the Talmud Yerushalmi, right? There's a Mishnah called Shvi'it, but the Yerushalmi exists. We don't have a Bavli on that. So many halachot, we once said that there's no Shulchan Aruch on Shmita, which makes it more difficult to get the Psak halacha to the bottom line halacha. We also don't have a Talmud Bavli on Shmita, but if you know anything about the Gemara, you know it interweaves different categories together. So we do have a glimpse into the world of the Babylonians' Talmud perspective on Shmita here in Moed Katan. Moed Katan is the tractate dealing with Moed, meaning festival, Katan, meaning small. The small festival, referring to Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of Pesach and Shavuot, have restrictions of labor. And the Mishnah compares and combines the restrictions of irrigating fields on Chol HaMoed along with the restrictions of irrigating fields in Shmita. So we get to hear from the Talmud Bavli something about Shmita. So here we go. Rava was of the opinion that Avot Asar Rachmana, only the primary categories, the Abba, the father categories of Shmita, the Torah forbade. Just what's written in the Torah, okay? I'm just going down here. Whereas Toladot, the subcategories of labor that are derived from them, for example, watering, were not prohibited by the merciful one, by the Torah. And how do you know this? Hey, it's our pasuk, right? Look at the beautiful, beautiful Talmudic logic here of Rava. He says as follows. I'm going to go back to the psukim above, and I'm going to tell you what Rava says. It says as follows. Sadcha lo tizra. Don't sow your field or prune your vineyard. Rava says, 1 second. These are both the same idea. Why didn't the Torah, which is always so conservative in its wording, it never says anything extra. If it says Sadcha lo tizra, don't sow your field. If it would have just said that, right, we would just get rid, here on the computer, we could even do this actually. It just says Sadcha lo tizra. So I would get the point. Don't sow your field. And anything that fosters growth, pruning vineyard, watering the field, grafting, everything that conducive to growth, I would say it's forbidden. Why did Torah have to give this green? Also, don't prune your vineyard. Isn't that included in not sowing your field? So it must be, says Rava, that the Torah gave this application of sowing, of planting, because that's it. That and nothing else. And similarly, here, I'm going to the next verse. We saw this. Lo tiktzor, lo tivtzor. Why twice? I got the point. Lo tiktzor, don't harvest. And anyone would understand that any kind of gathering, taking in, bringing in, harvesting, reaping, whatever you want to call it, it's forbidden. Why do you have to give this specific example of lo tivtzor? If you would have left this out, right, just for the fun of it, you could have left it out, and I would have understood. Why did we have to give this second example? It's because that's it. That's what Rava says. Only these four, these are the only four that are d'oraita. Everything else, in the case that Rava is talking about irrigation, but also fertilizing, pesticide, medicating, all of that is de rabbanon. It's only rabbinic. That is Rava's opinion. Now let's see Abaye's opinion. Abaye says, no. Abaye says, this. Abaye brings a braita. A braita, as we mentioned in classes, is Tanaitic material that was not included in the Mishnah. The braita reads the verses a different way. I'll show it to you live here. The braita says, Sadcha lo. Okay, I'll put that in this. Okay, Sadcha lo, Karmacha lo. No, nothing in the field. You can also read it this way, and that tells me that everything is forbidden, as it says here. All the other aspects of weeding and hoeing and mowing and all of that, that's forbidden. Point being, sum it up, we have two different approaches in the Gemara to these psukim. Are these examples, or are these the bottom line? Only these four, and everything else is Rabbanan. How do we paskin? So we go to the Rambam. The Rambam, who I told you is kind of our bottom line halacha authority, because we don't have Shulchan Aruch in these halachas. He says, Eino loke min Torah. You only receive punishment from the Torah if you violate Zriya, planting, Zmira, pruning, Ktsira, harvesting, Bitsira, gathering. So you see clearly that the Rambam is holding here, like Rava, that only these four are included. Only only planting a seed, pruning, and harvesting, gathering, those are the only things that are forbidden from the Torah. What does this have to do, pray tell, with the question of houseplants? So let's see as follows. So obviously, to plant in a field, that's an Isur Doraita, that's a Torah prohibition. Even those farmers who rely on the Heter Mechira, on the wholesale sale of the land, do not do planting by a Jew during Shmita, because that is one of the avot, that is one of the general categories. So in the Heter Mechira, it does not apply to those avot, to those doraita, those Torah prohibitions. Now, the question is, if we focus in and hone in on Zriya, on planting, are there ever instances when it is okay to plant, or to you want to put a new geranium into a flower pot, or for that matter, we're going to talk also about, if you want to do other things with your potted plants, what are you limited in watering them, or kind of sprucing them up and things like that. So the thing is like this. So let's ask two questions. What would happen if you planted in a house? And I don't mean in a house, let's say a greenhouse, in the ground, in the dirt of the earth, you want to plant. Okay, you just told me, Rabbi, it's asur midoraita, that's a Torah prohibition. No. But there's a roof, there's a greenhouse. It's not really outside, it's inside, but in the ground. So what's the halacha here? So here it's very interesting. The Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, as I mentioned before, deals extensively with Shmita. And the Jerusalem Talmud has uncertainty. It poses a doubt. It poses a question. Because think about it. You have the on one hand, you're planting in dirt. On the other hand, you're not planting outside. What does that make a difference? The Jerusalem Talmud says as follows. It says that we find two verses. If I would show you my screen again, which I'm not going to do right now, we'd find two terms of this sabbatical. The field, sadcha, and Shabbat haaretz. It's a sabbatical of the earth. Now, they may sound like synonyms, sadeh, aretz, field, earth. But if you think about it, it's not the same thing. Planting in the earth indoors, you have a greenhouse, a tent. So it is earth, it's aretz, but it's not sadeh. You can't really call that the open field. It has a roof and I guess 4 walls. So it's earth without a field. Does Shmita apply in such a case? The Jerusalem Talmud leaves that open question. It says that regarding Orla, you are chayiv to do Orla, because prohibition of Orla was never said that it had to be in a sadeh, whereas Trumos and Maestros, you do not have to do, you're exempt from Trumos and Maestros, because Trumos and Maestros, it says only sadeh, it doesn't say aretz. So this is an open question. In our generation, the last couple generations, there was a difference of opinion on this. Bottom line halacha, the overwhelming majority of poskim rule that just because you want to plant under a roof, but it's in the earth, it's in the ground, that does not permit it. It is at least a d'Rabbanan, it is at least a rabbinic prohibition to plant a seed under a greenhouse. And again, I'm emphasizing a greenhouse, but it's the real earth. I'm not talking about the greenhouse that has the plastic, those PVC rolls or anything like that. That's something else. We're going to get to that in a second. So by itself, planting indoors doesn't help you if you're planting in the earth. So let me ask you another question. Now I take away my greenhouse. This would be great. You can make like a cartoon of this shear. You can like get rid of this greenhouse. We just have a. Forgive me. It's late at night. You have a greenhouse. You got rid of the greenhouse. You have an open field, rolling hills, and you're okay. I got it. A roof's not going to help me because cutting my plant off from the sky doesn't help. I've got a better idea. Let me take a potted plant, put it in the middle of my field, and plant in that potted plant under the open sky, because you told me already the roof doesn't help me. What about that? In halacha, that's called a tzitz, a potted plant. So there's two kinds of potted plants. One kind of potted plant is the kind of pot that has holes in the bottom, right? Most potted plants have holes in the bottom for the water to drain out. And the Gemara and the Mishnah already tell us that if you put a potted plant in a field, that potted plant with the holes on the bottom, a tzitz nakuv, a hold plant, a hold pot, that is tantamount to planting straight into the ground, straight into the earth. For example, we know we've talked about several times the parallel between Shmita and Shabbos. So on Shabbos, let's say there's a potted plant with holes in it sitting on top of the ground, and you pull out that, cucumber plant from there, whatever, I don't know, and take that out. That's an Av Malacha, that's a Torah prohibition of Tolesh, because the potted plant is considered one with the ground and it's nurtured from the ground. So that's the same as pulling out a plant from the earth, uprooting a plant from the earth. The question is, what about a potted plant which has no holes? There's a solid barrier, a solid obstacle separating the dirt in the pot from the ground. It's sitting on the ground, but it's a plastic pot. Nothing is there. There's no holes. There's no seeping through of anything. Is that considered in the earth or not? And the answer is that in all the other mitzvahs of the Torah, for example, regarding trumot and masrot, if you grow, you grow an esrog in a pot like that, let's say, or a cucumber for that matter, it would be obligated in trumot and masrot, but not midoraita, but midirabanan, from the only rabbinically instituted, only rabbinic ordination. So ordinance, not ordination. I told you it's late. So the interesting thing is this. So in Shmita, we don't have any material on the subject. We have the halacha in the literature about trumot and masrot and other halachot that a potted plant with no holes is considered separated from the ground vis-a-vis the Torah law, but midrabanan, rabbinically, it is considered connected to the ground. Well, what about Shmita? So regarding Shmita, we do find a minority opinion that says that we can be lenient if it's a no holes in it, but the majority of opinion says that you have to treat even a pot with no holes midrabanan, that it's forbidden in Shmita midrabanan. So basically, we didn't find any leniencies, not yet. On one hand, we said if you plant inside a greenhouse under a roof, that's still forbidden in Shmita. On the other hand, we said if you plant in a pot that has no holes outside without a roof, it's forbidden, midrabanan. But what about combining these two halachot, or these two scenarios? I'm going to take a potted plant with no holes and put it under the roof. In other words, I have it under the roof. It's cut off from the sky. It's cut off from the rest of the field. It's not called a sadeh. And I'm going to put a barrier underneath. It's a potted plant without holes, so it's not directly connected to the earth. So it's neither aretz nor sadeh. It's neither earth nor a field. It's indoors and it's not earth. So here we can be mekil, meaning we can be lenient. In other words, here's the general principle which I want you to remember for halacha l'maaseh: a potted plant that has no holes in the bottom, that can indoors under a roof, that is, you have successfully created a kind of like a bubble, almost entirely exempt from Shmita. On top is the roof, on the bottom is the pot, it's not connected to the earth. That is a no Shmita zone. Now, you're probably thinking, well, all my pots have holes in them, but I have that plate underneath. What about that plate? Yes, the plate counts. Even if the pot has holes, but it has a plate, that constitutes a separation between the dirt in the pot and the earth, and that is okay, with one caveat. The caveat is that if it's an earthenware pot, it's ceramic, then that pot is not a separation. That plate is not a separation. It goes earth and then pot, earthenware pot, earth, earth, earth. It's all one it's one entity. I wanted to say enchilada, but I didn't think that would be good to say in a recording. It's all one entity. Um, so that would be a problem to use a plate or a pot that's earthenware. But if it's plastic or glass or metallic, that is okay. What is okay? It is okay to take a potted plant with a plate underneath, under a roof, and let's go from easy to difficult. You can certainly water it. You can treat it with whatever you need to treat it and take care of it, take off the dead leaves. That is all okay. What about planting in it, right? Let's say you didn't make the deadline, you saw those geraniums, you want to put a geranium inside. Technically speaking, as I said, it's a no Shmita zone. It's okay. However, we don't usually apply this leniency unless there are extenuating circumstances. In other words, to go ahead and just put that geranium, to transfer that geranium into a potted plant inside with no holes in the bottom on the plate, that is, we're not going to do that unless there's a real good reason for it. What's a real good reason? If you're a farmer, it's your parnasa. So think about it. Those greenhouses we call a matzah minutak, where it's separated from the ground. The greenhouse has a roof on top, and there's a plastic roll, a plastic sheet on the bottom. And they put, I think, the earth on top of the plastic. That's like one big potted plant with no holes. So that is okay. And that's why a lot of the Mahadran produce in Shmita comes from greenhouses like that, because we have the double leniency, the roof and the flooring. So we wouldn't usually plant, but you could really treat that potted plant indoors under a roof with the tzalachat, with the plate underneath, as usual in Shmita. Some of you may be thinking, well, I don't have a pot without holes. I don't even have a plate, but I have a floor. I have a marble floor. I have balatot. Doesn't that count? Is that a separation? So here the story is like this. If you live on the ground floor and you have, there's the earth, and then you're on the ground floor and you put a plant with holes on it, a potted plant with holes on the tile floor, that's a problem. You would need another separation. You need that plate underneath. But for those of you who don't live on the ground floor, whether you're talking about the second floor of your home or you live in an apartment, if you're on the second floor, then it's okay. If you have a ceramic floor, which I know you do, you have tiles, so you don't have an earthen floor, you can put a whole potted plant on the tiled floor or carpet or whatever. It has cement, if it's on the second floor or above. Last point for the day, interesting halacha. Many of us have these hanging things, those hooks that go on the bars, and we hang outside. What about that? Is that a potted plant? Let's say it usually has like a base, like a long, thin plate, if you will, that separates it from the ground. Here it's more strict because the hanging apparatus is attached to your home. It's attached to the building. And the fact that it's attached to the building means that it's really attached to the floor, to the ground, to the earth. The building is attached to the ground, I hope, and the hanger is attached to the house, so it's really considered attached to the floor. Someone asked me in class, what about she has the hanger is under a roof. It's, the ledge comes over, so if it's under a roof, you can be makil, you can be lenient there. It's considered as though it were in the house. But again, you don't plant in those hangers on Shmita. Okay, so I think that's about it for today. Stay tuned the next time, or I'll see you live, or if you see us in Zoom, we have some outstanding questions, which I'll relate to in the next class. And I hope everything was clear. Thank you for joining us.